Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupine avatara varishtaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. So we are continuing our discussion on the philosophy of Ramanuja, which is known as the Vishishtadvaita philosophy. Now, there are a few very interesting anecdotes, legends, stories associated with Ramanuja. And one of the most well-known legends is in connection with his writing of his own magnum opus, his most important and the most profound work in the Vishishtadvaita tradition, called Sri Bhashya. In fact, there is a verse, what you call a sloka, a verse that actually explains the importance of this. It is said that one day, Ramanuja was talking to one of the priests of one of the important temples in Kanchi. It's well known for a number of important temples. Maybe the most important temple is the one which Shankaracharya himself went and sanctified by his presence, called Kanchi Kamakshi. It's the most important temple in that temple town, Kanchi. But there is another very ancient, a very important temple that is dedicated to Vishnu. I mean, it belongs to the Vishnu Vaishnava tradition. It's called Varadaraja temple. So it is said that he went to the temple and talked to one of the senior priests, and he discussed his plan to write a commentary on Brahma Sutras, which later he wrote and became the celebrated Sri Bhashyam, it's called. So, and in answer to his question, the chief priest gave a very interesting reply. The reply is put in the form of a verse, which is transmitted from generation to generations of the teachers of the Ramanuja system. Sriman param tattvamaham matam me bheda prapattihi nirapaya hetuhu na avyashyaki smritihi antakale mokshaha mahapurna ika aryavarya. This is the verse. So it needs some explanation. In a way, this verse gives a gist of the entire metaphysics of Ramanuja system. That's the most interesting aspect of this. Sriman param tattvamaham matam me. So in my opinion, or according to me, the highest reality, param tattvam, the highest reality, the absolute in spiritual philosophy is aham, means the Saguna Sakara Ishvara in Ramanuja system is called Sriman Narayana. It's a deity of the temple. It's an aspect of Vishnu. Now you can find in Indian tradition a number of such stories. Whether you take those stories as literal truths or not, they have another message in a way. In a way, it could be a legend transmitted and spread by the followers of Ramanuja to give him or his work a divine aspect. But anyway, it is very significant for a proper understanding of the philosophy from a very traditional angle. Now, in a university discussion, you may not take this, may not give much importance to this. No need either. But then, from a traditional point of view, even if you don't take it literally, still it has got a significance. So, it says, Lord Krishna, all the Sriman Narayana, the aspect of Vishnu, says, Aham param tattvam, I am the absolute reality. This anthropomorphic creator God in the Ramanuja system called Sriman Narayana as a deity. So, this is, I mean, the Saguna Sakara, God, the personal, impersonal, that's a Chit Visishta, Vishishtaikyam. I mean, the absolute reality, which is the totality of all auspicious qualities, all power, all glories, which is present in everyone as Antaryami, as the indweller, whose evolutes the entire creation is. That I, that means you may call it the anthropomorphic created God, put in the language of Western theology, is the absolute reality. Seaman, I mean, he is addressing Ramanuja. And then, Veda Prapattihi Nirapaya Hetuhu. Another point is, in the reality is that the world and the different individual souls and God are not identical as mentioned in the Advaita works, but they are distinct from each other. It means God, the absolute reality, and the creation, including living beings and non-living empirical objects, they are distinct and different. But you have to remember, there is an aspect of identity in Ramanuja system. That's why it is called the Vishishtadvaita. But it's not pure Advaita, it's not Kevala Advaita of Shankaracharya, but it is Vishishta, means conditioned. There is a modification. It's conditioned by this difference. What is the difference? The living beings, jivas, and the worldly objects are different and distinct from Ishvara. But that Ishvara, that divine reality, is present as an indweller. We call it Antaryami, is everyone. So it's called Aprathak Siddhi, means. It is not the doctrine of non-difference. But why should you specially mention it is non-different? But because there is an aspect of difference in it. Otherwise, you don't have to mention it is non-different. That is an important thing. Unless there is a remote possibility of some distinction, you do not have to mention that it is not distinct. So there is distinction and also there is a non-distinction. That is called Aprata Siddhi. We will discuss this, a very pertinent, very important point in the dialectics of Ramanuja system. So Bheda, means there is a distinction. Prapattihi Nirapaya Hetu. Prapatti we already discussed. So one single verse summarizes the entire metaphysics of a great philosophical system. You can find it everywhere throughout this Hindu philosophical tradition. One important verse. We don't know, very often we have no idea who wrote that. It comes as a part of a tradition. It is transmitted from teacher to teacher to teacher like that. It's a lineage. But that verse has got a great historical and philosophical significance. So Prapatti or complete surrender, called Sharanagati, is the only way, the only means for spiritual liberation, spiritual enlightenment. So Prapatti we already seen. Prapatti has got two aspects. The real meaning of Prapatti is self-surrender. In reality, it is a state of human spiritual evolution. When you reach a point, through intense spiritual practices, through devotion, a person prays, meditates, engages in different forms of worship, reads scriptures, practices a lot of austerities. Then finally, he reaches a point, I am totally helpless. I am totally destitute. Kripana means karpanyam. There's a term used in Gita and also in Ramanuja system. So, I am totally incapable of taking care of my own spiritual destiny. This can happen at two different levels. Somebody who led a very worldly life, totally bohemian, Epicurean, worldly life, without any connection with spirituality, drunkards, profligates and so on. Finally, that person suddenly gets an inner awakening. Well, this won't do. I have to live a different life. Life has a different meaning. And what he does, he goes to a library and he takes a copy of the Bible and reads the Sermon on the Mount, or reads the life of some mystics, Bhagavad Gita or any scriptures, or any holy book. If he's a Buddhist, he reads the life of Buddha, Lalita Vistara, whatever it is. Or he may start joining a church choir, and he enjoys that, or a synagogue, or any tradition, and he closely identifies with that. And he's actually entering the highway of spiritual life. That is also a kind of prapatti. That's what happened to St. Augustine, St. Francis of Assisi, a sudden transformation. Or I mentioned in my last session, the poor pilgrim in the way of a pilgrim, a sudden awakening and need to take a different route in your life, to tread a different path, a totally new idea of life as a whole. That is also a kind of prapatti. That is the prapatti of surrender at the beginning of one's spiritual life, entering the path of devotion. This is one. The other prapatti is the last reach, the peak of spiritual evolution. After awakening, getting this awakening, long years of spiritual life, we can the inner castle in the autobiographical writings of centuries of Avila, and going inner and deeper and deeper and deeper. That's a kind of prapatti. That is total self-surrender, where God becomes a reality in every word, every thought, every deed. Where self-surrender, this surrender becomes a real fact. You cannot even call it surrender. You actually realizes that God is the only player in this game of life. You have absolutely no role. And this we realize. And the realization comes as a silent inner conviction. You don't declare, make a statement. It's a deep experience that comes. And you can find many mystics in many traditions have reached this state, this prapatti. And that prapatti Ramanuja defines, at least in tradition, not Ramanuja, because this is referred to in Vedanta Desika's Rahasyatrayasara, Ramanuja's own Sharanagati Gadyam and Vaikuntha Gadyam and elsewhere in the Gita Bhashya and so on, especially when Ramanuja writes his commentary on the Charama Sloka, the last important verse, the final conclusion from a devotional point of view, that is, Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja Aham Tva Sarva Papebhyo Mokshayishyami Masuja. 66th verse of the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which says, Lord Krishna tells Arjuna, after teaching all these Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, Raja Yoga, everything, and many other different means of spiritual discipline, then Lord Krishna says, well, if you can't really understand or practice any of this, you completely surrender yourself, and all your other paths, all your efforts, you may have practiced, you may have tried Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, everything, including Jnana Yoga, because Jnana Yoga is also one of the means for prapatti in Ramanuja system. In Shankaracharya system, that's the highest. But anyway, it doesn't. In spiritual, if you take a spiritual perspective, there is no conflict. So this is the essence of this self-surrender. So it is included in the formal acceptance and statement and declaration of self-surrender in the Sri Vaishnava system, where you make the statement in the presence of a teacher, I am completely surrendering myself. And in Ramanuja system states that it has got 6 components. The main, that is Atmaniksheba, self-surrender, that is called Angi and Angas, the different auxiliary aspects, different elements, that is 5 different elements, and one main point. The main point is self-surrender, Atmaniksheba. And its different aspects is Anugulyasya Sankalpaka, Pradigulyasya Varjanam, Rakshasya Viswasa, Goptutta Varanandada, and Karpanyam. That means a sense of total helplessness, feeling oneself to be destitute, and then an urge to hold on to the most positive aspect of devotion and to avoid and disregard all negative aspects. That is Pradigulyasya Varjanam, and a strong faith that God will protect me, and a strong conviction that God is the sole protector. And also this feeling of total helplessness, being a destitute. All these 5 combined together, joining with Atmaniksheba, one's own self-surrender. Again, I want to repeat, this in reality is not a statement as it is frequently understood in the traditional theological circles. But in spiritual life, it is a state of spiritual evolution. So sometimes you find Ananyagadittum, Kaingaryam, and all that. So if you just Aginjanyam, you yourself, you are worthless, you are destitute, and then there is no other way, you are the only destination. You make this statement, and immediately Sharanagati or self-surrender comes. It doesn't come like that. It's just like confessing. Every Sunday in the morning, you go to the church, you confess, and next week again you go. So it becomes a regular, it's a license renewal program, which is not the real implication of self-surrender. It is actually a spiritual rebirth that is implied in its real implication. That is Sharanagati. That's why he says, Navasyaki Smritihi. All rituals, different spiritual rituals, mentioned in so many books. You can find Smarta, Srauda, either Vedic tradition or Smriti tradition. There are so many rituals, so many sacraments that an householder is supposed to undertake as part of his or her devotional life. You have to practice charity, Bodhayajna, and you have to practice the kind of indebtedness. You should pay back. That is called spiritual, scriptural, and cultural indebtedness to our elders. We call Devayajna, Pitriyajna, the ancestors. So we are indebted to we have a obligation. We have to pay back to our ancestors, the sages, and also the different deities for being able to preserve the tradition. So we have to practice a number of rituals, including charity, making gifts. All these you have to practice, and there are certain ways to practice, certain mantras to be uttered. It should be done in a regular ritualistic manner. None of these matters if you do real self-surrender. It means you transcend rituals. You transcend, in fact, religion. You transcend religion. What is religion? Religion, in its normal definition, implies sets of rules and regulations and sacraments and practices, rituals and so on, which are very important. They do have their own importance. But when you completely surrender, you transcend, you go beyond the realm of rituals. So that's why in this mantra it says, na avasyaki smritihi, means all these rituals and practices and obligations mentioned in so many law books, canonical literature of religious tradition, all these are absolute trash when you reach that level of spiritual self-surrender. when you become a mystic, when every day becomes a day for celebration, when every moment becomes a pilgrimage, when every word becomes a prayer and every thought becomes a meditation, the divine, then you don't have to practice any of the rituals. So, and then Ramanuja says, of course, this particular verse, actually it was according to tradition, at least in Vaishnava tradition, according to Ramanuja at least, this reply came from the deity of Kanchi, Varadaraja Perumal temple. But according to the story, it came from a teacher called Tirukkachi Nampi. Means, of course, there are different views. According to some books, it happened in Srirangam temple. According to some others, it happened in Kanchi temple. Anyway, that's not so very important. But the verse is very profound in it, that it contains the essence, a summary of the ethics, morality, philosophy and spirituality of Vishishtadvaita system. This is a genius of some of these great teachers who put everything in one verse. You just imagine Advaita, Brahma Satyam Jagad Mithya Jivo Brahmaiva Napara. This is the essence of Advaita. Brahman is only reality. This world is a relative reality, not absolutely unreal, but not absolutely real. And Brahman and everything, all of us, all the jivas are essentially not as body, mind complexes, not different from Brahman. So is Slokardhena Pravakshyami Yeduktam Grandhagodivihi Brahma Satyam Jagad Mithya Jiva Brahmaiva Napara. This is a whole verse. Means Shankaracharya says, I am going to make a statement in half a verse, what is expounded in millions and millions of scriptures. What is that? Slokardha means half a sloka, means half a verse. In half a verse, I am going to expound the essence of what is being taught and described in millions and millions of books together. What is that? Brahman is only reality. Everything else is mithya. Mithya. Again, I had to take this opportunity to remind, mithya doesn't mean absolutely unreal. Every time when I read Ramanuja's works, or Shruti Prakashiga, or Vedanta Desiga's Talpilya Chandrika, or even Shata Dushani, a book written by Vedanta Desika, Shata Dushani means 100 problems and defects of Advaita. That's the meaning of it. Shata Dushani. 100. So Vedanta Desika takes pains to give a long list of all the problems and all the drawbacks of Advaita. It's called Shata Dushani. And surprisingly, maybe not surprisingly, in 20th century, a great writer, who happened to be from my own native place, wrote a book called Shata Bhushani, means 100 auspicious, the glories of Advaita. It's a reply to Vedanta Desika, who wrote this. Remember, Vedanta Desika lived between 1268 and 1369. That means 1268 he was born, and 1369 he passed away. So he also lived a fairly long life, quite a long life. And Ramanuja, of course, passed away in 1137, and it was in 1300s that Malik Kafur came, and a few years before Vedanta Desika's passing away, how the fanatics, Malik Kafur and the fanatics attacked Srirangam temple and massacred, made a genocide of the great scholars and priests of that temple, that locality. That happened. But this is a different thing. So, Vedanta Desika wrote many great books, like Tattva Kalapa, Adhikarana Saravali, which is actually a very interesting book. It deals, it's a study of Brahma Sutras, gives the essential teachings of Brahma Sutra. Bhashya, the Sri Bhashya written by Ramanuja. Ramanuja's commentary on Brahma Sutras, 562 verses you find there. So along with others, he wrote this Sadadushani, means a list of 100 dialectical, polemical problems of Advaita. And then he says, Mokshaha Antakale. Liberation comes at the time of death. That means liberation happens only at the end of our life. That means in Advaita Vedanta, there is this concept of the Jivan Mukta. Means you are already liberated, still you continue physically living in this world. The difference between somebody who is already enlightened but still continues to live in this world and a person who is not at all enlightened is, when something happens, it doesn't shock if you are liberated, because every moment you can remember without any effort. You can remember the fact that you are a reality, and this body, you are the absolute reality, not the body, but the body is only a vehicle, an instrument through which that absolute reality manifests. And that absolute reality, Atman, Brahman, it is imperishable. It is eternal. So that spiritual experience can always be brought back. You can find in Sri Ramakrishna's life, Sometimes Sri Ramakrishna enters into a mystical mood called samadhi. So at that moment, he has no body consciousness. And afterwards, he comes back to body consciousness. So he had this experience much early in his life. But then he continued living in the Dakshineswar temple. He lived like a very ordinary person. He also had his food. He also lived like an ordinary person, but he was extraordinary. And that extraordinary nature very often expresses itself in so many ways on so many occasions. So that's a concept of Jivan Mukta. And Ramanuja doesn't accept that. Ramanuja says this Jivan Mukti, according to him, Sayujyam, it comes only at the end of one's life. So this is an important point. Now, what does Ramanuja mean by the absolute reality? So, of course, you often find the word Brahman used. So that particular expression, I have explained this on many other occasions while taking Shankaracharya's commentary. So, according to Ramanuja, he says, the real meaning of Brahman is Brihadi Brahmayati iti tat param Brahma. He takes this important statement, which actually comes in another scripture. It's called Ragasya Amnaya Brahmana, one of the Vedic one of the scriptures connected to Vedic tradition. Ragasya Amnaya. Amnaya means Vedas. Amnaya de Upadishyate anena idi amnayaka. Something that advises, that instructs either Dharma or Brahman, either Dharma according to Mimamsas and Brahman according to Uttara Mimamsas. So that's the meaning of Brahman. So Brahman. That means something that is by itself vast, called Bhuma in the Chandogya Upanishad 7th chapter. Means vast, all-pervading, transcendental, and something that makes the person who realizes it vast and great. So remember, in Advaita, there is a statement in Taittiriya Upanishad, Brahmavid Brahmaiva Bhavati. A novel Brahmajnani realizes that the absolute reality, Brahman or Atman, Paramatman, that he seeks to understand is in reality non-distinct and non-different from his own real inner being. And this is what he realizes. So it goes beyond even the Mahavakya called Aham Brahmasmi, because he really experienced. So Brahman means that which is vast, great, grand. It's not in the sense of a comparative language that is used. By its very nature, it is all-pervading. And it also makes the person who realizes this truth, the Brahmajnanam, who gets Brahmajnanam, all-pervading. So that's why Brihadi, Brahmkhayati, iti tat param Brahma. And Brihatvad, Brahmanatvad, tat Brahma iti abhidiyate. Vishnu Purana. Shankaracharya also refers to this in his Bhashya. Brihatvad, Brahmanatvad. It is the same thing. It is vast, it is transcendental, it is all-pervading. It is also capable of making the person who realizes the supreme truth through enlightenment non-different from Brahman. So this, of course, if you go to the etymology, you find there is a pratyaya, called a suffix called manin, and the manin nakarasya akare ruto ratvam gunadi sutra. I am not going to the analysis of this term according to Panini's grammar, but what I mean to say is, even his etymological description makes you understand that it is the concept of non-definable, indescribable, but experiential, non-verbalized spiritual truth which cannot be explained, which can only be experienced. Now, of course, this is one important thing. So you can find Satyam, Jnanam, Anandam, Brahma, etc. Sadeva, Saumidam, Agrasi, Ekameva, Dvitiyam, etc. These are the terms used in the Upanishads, which Shankaracharya uses to establish that this Brahman is one all-pervading supreme truth. It is the only Paramarthik Satta or eternal reality. And it cannot be even called as a creator of this world. What is the relationship between this Brahman and this world? According to Advaita, this world itself is, in fact, at the end of the day, non-existent. That's what you find in the Adhyatma Ramayana and also, most importantly, in Gaudapada Karika. Now, this is from the highest point of view. But from an empirical point of view, this world is there. This creation is there. So, but the difference is, Ramanuja doesn't, and he will not see the distinction between the empirical perspective and the absolute perspective. According to Shankara, from the absolutist perspective, from Paramarthika Satta perspective, Brahman is only reality, everything else is only relative. And all these empirical things, Nama, Rupa, etc., are only changing moods, changing manifestations, like the different vessels, different dishes, different jars and pots and pans made of clay. You cannot remove the clay from them, so that essentially clay is the only reality, something like that. But Ramanuja will tell you, no, they are clay, no doubt. Pots and pans are all, there is a kind of identity and oneness that is called Vishishtadvaita. There is an identity. But still, there is a difference because you cannot drink water using a big jar or a pot, you need a glass. So it's a different thing. Because its practical utility is different. So it makes that difference. And that difference is undeniable. It is not just a relative. It is as absolute as the Paramarthika Satta itself. In other words, there is no such thing as a relative reality. There is no difference between the absolute and relative. The world itself is real. These empirical objects are also real. There is no such thing as vyavaharika or relative. So he takes a statement, tada ikshada bahusyam prajayedi, etc. This comes in so many ways in the Taittiriya also, so kameda bahusyam prajayedi, etc. Tadaikshada bahusyam prajayedi, etc. That means, it's an important statement in Upanishad literature. That Brahman, that absolute reality looked, observed, and then did sankalpa, let me become many. And that's how they explain this plurality of worldly objects, different empirical manifestations. And they're all real. They're all as real as Brahman itself. The only difference is they are dependent upon Brahman. Brahman is not dependent upon anything. Now, I can explain this using the analogy that Sri Ramakrishna uses in his own unique language, unique style. Suppose you are trying to enter a house, and when you reach the gate, you find the gate is made of, let us say, wood, timber, whatever it is. And then you enter the gate and you reach the courtyard, you find the courtyard also is made of wood. You may think when you reach the gate, you may think, but of course the courtyard would not be made of timber clay. But when you see that, you find it is the same timber. Then when you enter the home, the house, the steps, that also is made of timber, wood, the same wood. And then finally you find every room, every roof, everything is made of the same wood with which the gate is made. Or you can say bricks. So at the beginning you may think the gate is of course made of bricks. You may think the courtyard may be made of stones, but that also is made of bricks, you eventually find out. And then you find every room, the roof, the floor, everything is made of bricks only. Now, one may ask this question, is there no distinction between the bricks used to make the courtyard or the gate and the bricks used to make the house, the rooms, the walls, etc.? There is a difference. Because the gate is used for one purpose, the courtyard is used for another purpose, the road through which you enter to drive the car towards the home, that serves a different purpose, the walls serve a different purpose, the ceiling has a different purpose. But they are all made of the same bricks. So Advaita is like realizing that everything is made of the same bricks. The utility will be different, because you use the gate for one purpose, but it's made of bricks only. So essentially, there is no distinction. This is Advaitic point of view. Ramanuja would say, there is certainly similarity because the same kind of bricks used for everything. But still, that distinction due to the utility value makes a distinction absolute, means there is absolute distinction. Shankaracharya will say that distinction is not absolute, it is only relative, because the same brick can be used for everything else. Madhvacharya will say the gate which is made of bricks is totally different from the wall which is made of the same brick. And the roof for which the same bricks are used is totally different. So he would tell you that every cup, saucer and vessel and jar or pots made of clay, they all make a total and complete and absolute, unchangeable distinction. That is Panchabheda Siddhanta, which we will discuss later when we discuss Madhvacharya system. So, in other words, it is a kind of spiritual evolution from Dvaita to Advaita. Ramanuja's most wonderful contribution is, and that's a very important contribution, is his unique exposition of the concept of Prapatti Acharanagati. You don't find so much of emphasis given to practical devotional life, anywhere else you don't find, which is comparable to what Ramanuja did in his works. For example, Bhakti and Prapatti. He said there are two levels of devotional progression or evolution. One, you move away from world and then you move towards your supreme goal. The moving towards supreme goal is Prapatti. That is the absolute, that is the real path leading to spiritual enlightenment. That's why he says Prapatti is the only hedu or means or cause for liberation. And he also says that when you realize this, then you realize that God is also bhokta bhogyam preritaram chamatva sarvam proktam trividam brahma etat. Same Brahman is bhokta, the experiencer, and bhogyam, what is experienced, and also the one who causes all this to happen, the karta, the one who is the real doer behind everything, and the person, the real actor, and the person who is enjoying, experiencing, everything is Brahman, Trividam Brahma Etat. So, of course, you have to remember, Shankaracharya will tell you that there are, of course, important statements in the Upanishad literature which talks about creation. But he says creation is only stated, creation is expounded only with the view to eventually show that it is not absolutely real. That's the meaning. Srishti is explained eventually to explain it away as just a relativity. That is Shankara's view. But Ramanuja will say Srishti is real, creation is real. This is an important point, remember. That's why in Shankaracharya's system, he rejects the triple distinctions, the triple difference called Sogata Bheda, Sajadiya Bheda and Vijadiya Bheda. The three types of distinctions which are normally considered for philosophical discussion in Vedanta. That is Sajadiya, Vijadiya, Sogata Bhedas. Three types of differences. One is the differentiation happens in three different ways. That is Sajadiya, Vijadiya and Sogata. Sajadiya means differentiation between a species or a kind. See, for example, the same kind of same species, say cows, two different cows, Sajadiya Veda. That is, it means one cow is different from another cow. So that's called Sajadiya Bheda, belonging to the same Jadi. Vijadiya Bheda means, let us say, the differentiation across different species. For example, human beings and cows. That Bheda. And Sugata Bheda, for example, it means it is internal division. That is, for example, when you say the same tree, the leaves, the branches, the fruits, but all belong to the same tree. Internal differentiations. Shankaracharya denies all the three distinctions. Ramanuja denies only two distinctions. He accepts and he confirms one distinction, that is, he says there is Sogata Bheda, there is no Sajadiya Bheda, and there is no Vijadiya Bheda. So these are all important differences. That means in Ramanuja system there is an element of Advaita, but there is an element of Dvaita or distinction. So I think I have already explained one important, covered one important aspect of Ramanuja system, and from next class onwards we will turn to another important aspect of Ramanuja's contribution. To complete the present discussion, you have to remember, according to Ramanuja, Ishvara or God or Brahman is Saguna, Sakara, Savishesha. Brahman, which is the totality of all auspicious qualities. It is Ananta Guna, Kalyana, Guna Sampanna, Ananda Swarupa and Jagat Janmadi Karana. So these are one after another, you can find all this. One point is, It is Ananda Guna. I mean, a repository of innumerable auspicious qualities and auspicious types of glories. Second, it is the essence of all that brings you good things. Again, it's a kind of kalyana, means auspiciousness. Again, it is Ananda Swarupa. So you can find in many of the temples where the Vaishnava tradition is followed, or you can find in Madhva, Nimbarka, Vallabha, Chaitanya, that is ISKCON, and also Ramanuja and different aspects of these Vaishnava philosophical systems. We go to those temples. Temples are very grand, and there's plenty of gold, and also if you look at the offerings, you find the deities enjoy a lot of wonderful food stuff, very good sweets, because that they always associate the spiritual concept with auspiciousness and all that gives you good luck, good auspicious things you can find. You don't find in Shiva temples a lot of great, wonderful, huge collection of sweets being offered in Shiva temples. Very, very unlikely you find. But in Vishnu temple you find. That's because Lakshmi is an important aspect of Ramanuja system, or Vaishnava system in general. One aspect of Lakshmi means Aishwarya, wealth, auspiciousness, that makes your life happy and that helps you to live a sattvic life in this world. All these elementary qualities and aspects are found in the system. It's called Ananda Swarupa. So, Ishvara is Ananda Swarupa. And also Ishvara is the Jagat Janmadi Karana. It means it is the cause of the emergence of this world. That means Ishvara or God actually creates this world. He is the one who creates this world. Creation is his real work. One may ask this question because this is also common in Abrahamic religions. God is a creator. Creator sometimes almost becomes a proper noun very often in certain traditions. Creator, ultimate creator. But in Shankaracharya system, creatorhood or creatorship itself is a limitation, because this world is full of contradictions, internal conflicts, imponderable, so to speak, things that we cannot understand. So how can you limit God just or bring him or reduce him to just the status of creator of this world, which is by its very nature impermanent, very often mutually contradictory, and of course by stretch of any imagination not a very wonderful place. In all tradition there is an attempt, an urge to go beyond this world. In all tradition, everywhere you find, including Abrahamic religions, the ultimate goal is to go beyond this world. That means the idea that this world by its very nature is something to be transcended, to go beyond. That idea is common in all religious traditions, including Buddhism, of course. In Buddhism, it is very, very important. Chattvari Ari Satyani, the Four Noble Truths, essentially makes you understand the impermanence, the limitation, the inherent limitations or inadequacies of this created world. That's very obvious. So also in Abrahamic traditions, the ultimate goal should be to go beyond this world, to a place where you live in close proximity with God, heaven or whatever it is. So the idea that this world by its very nature is limited in scope. So, but it is okay, it's perfectly okay if you tell that this world is created by God. But to reduce God's status or the status of the absolute reality, or the highest concept of the absolute reality, to just the creatorship of this world is a limitation. So, Shankaracharya also, Janmadi Setaha, then the sutra, in the early part, the second sutra, it comes Janmadi Setaha, means that. The Yadova Imani Bhudani Jayandi, all the Taittiriya Upanishad caught in Ramanuja system, very clearly, and also in Shankaracharya system. But Shankaracharya says, you cannot just define Brahman or absolute reality or God, so to speak, to just the creatorship of this world. Because the world itself is essentially changing, always being modified. So it is not the absolute reality, it is only a relative reality, it is only Vyavaharika Satta. So God as the creator of this Vyavaharika Jagat, this empirical, relative world, it is a limitation. But Ramanuja doesn't say, so he says Ishvara or Sriman Vasudeva is this, that is Jagat Jatmadi Karana, is the cause of the emergence, cause for the emergence of this world. That is emergence, creation, existence and dissolution. God is the ultimate cause. It means Jagat Janmadi, Jagat means this empirical world. Janma means this transmigratory cycle of the cosmic level and also the individual level. It goes on transmigration. This cycle is moving forward like a wheel, and God is the cause behind. Shankaracharya says this approach is okay, but it is a penultimate state. If you believe that God is the creator of this world and the operator of this transmigratory cycle at the cosmic and also at the individual level, at the macro and micro levels both, is perfectly okay, but you cannot limit God to this level. God is beyond that, because this cosmos, this empirical world is not absolutely real. It is only relatively real. It is mithya, empirically real, not real in the transcendental sense, the absolute sense. So the idea of God goes beyond that, goes beyond creatorship of this world, and he says creation is only an apparent creation. It is only vivarta. Just like, for example, you mistake a rope for a snake. That's all. But Ramanuja will tell you, no, this world is actually real. It is as real as Brahman itself. The only difference is it is dependent upon Brahman. Brahman is not dependent upon anything. It is Swatantra. World is Aswatantra. Anyway, so we'll continue this discussion in the next class. From another point of view, a few interesting dialectical views, conflicting. I'm not going to polemical discussion, but very interesting points of view in both Ramanuja and Shankara system. Next class. Now we will have interaction. Most welcome. Thank you.
Swamiji pranams.
Yeah.
In Ramanuja system,
yeah,
it looks like the term Ishvara and Vishnu Narayana are the same and they are used synonymously.
Yeah.
If they are the same, is there any significance to having these separate terms for them?
There is no significance, because Ramanuja used the Brahmanaha, Ishwarasya, already used.
Okay.
So you can find Ramanuja, there is a very famous commentary, I think I read it long ago, it says Narayana Suktam Ramanujainam. So very, very well-known commentary is there in Ramanuja system. So there Narayana is interpreted as Brahman Ishvara. So it's a very famous, I don't remember, but yeah.
So even though they use the terms Ishvara, Narayana and Vishnu, they
See,
all refer to the same.
See, Andar Bhishta Sarvam Andar Vishishtadvaita Sarvam Vyapi Narayana Sthitaha means Sa Brahmasa Siva Sendra Sokshara Paramaswarad. So you find Brahma, Shiva, Vishnu, all is Nada Narayana himself, you know. So this is Narayana Suktam, so Mahanarayana Upanishad. So for him, everything, he himself says, Kalpanadida Gunanama Karaha, Purushottamaka, Sarveshwaraga, all these terms are used in Sri Bhashya. Chijjada Shariravan, Vibhuhu, Sukshma, Sarvakataka, Avveka, Sarvabhuta Yoni, you find. So, Ramanuja uses every conceivable adjective. But, where, you know, in their traditional taking refuge, Sharanagati mantra, Narayana is used. That's an important thing. Om Namo Bhagavate Narayana. So that's it. So that's all. But then Ramanuja identified Narayana as not in the sense of Vasudeva's son of Devaki, so not in that sense, you know. So that's an important thing. The Narayana Upanishad, Narayana Suktam is very important for this Sri Vaishnava tradition. Yeah.
Swami?
Yeah.
What is there a difference between the Ramanuja system and Shankara system in the concept of free will?
Yeah, really, there is less free will in the Ramanuja system, much less free will. There is an element of fatalism in the Ramanuja system. But in Shankara system, there is absolutely no fatalism. Because if you take refuge and if you can completely surrender, if it becomes a spiritual experience, there is no problem. But from a theological point of view, everything depends upon the grace of Sivan Narayana. The grace is very important. Like Christianity. Grace is mystical Christianity. You know. Grace is very significant in the Ramanuja system. So, but it is certainly very humane, very humanistic compared to Madhva system. In Madhva system, there is what I may be inclined to call a little bit of crudeness, because there is a little bit of, you know, Madhva reduces his God into a ruthless arbitrator who is so ruthless as to condemn some people into eternal hell, where even if they do all things, they have no way to come out. So that is a very, I don't think, there is nothing comparable to that in other Indian traditions. Maybe this is an exception. And I don't find this in any of the Puranas. It's absolutely strange that we don't know from where he got this, the Madhva got this idea of Nitya Naraka Siddhanta. That is a kind of a total denial of free will. So Ravana, Kumbha, all the demons, and he gives the example of the demons who were great mischief doers, you know, in the Puranic mythological literature. And he says they're permanent residents in hell. Even if they repent, then they cannot get liberation. So it's a different. Anyway, I'm giving the example to make you understand the significance of Ramanuja as a humanist. So he believes in Kripa, grace of God. And to that extent, there is a little less of free will in Ramanuja system than in Shankara. In Shankaracharya system, anyone who gets sadhana chatushtaya sampatti, the four disciplines. I mean, if you believe, if you have a strong understanding of what is real, what is unreal, you disregard the unreal and you hold on to the real, and then you develop all the 6 qualities, samadhi, sakka, sampatti, then you have a strong urge for liberation. That is nitya nitya vastu vega ihamutra bharabhoga viraga samadhi, sakka, sampatti, mumukshuttam. If you do that, then you naturally have an inclination to do sravanam of Mahavakyas or any holy names, and then you focus on its meaning, marana, and then you can you become fit for spiritual liberation, spiritual disciplines. But so there is nothing like the Nitya Naraka Siddhanta, the doctrine of eternal damnation, which you find only in Madhva system. You don't find it anywhere else in Indian theistic system. So there is almost zero free will for certain people in Madhva system, privileged people to live, privileged enough to live in hell all time, So that's a total rejection of free will. In Ramanuja system, there is free will because you can take refuge in God. You can do that. So that's the but then everything depends upon God's way, God's grace. To that extent, less. Shankaracharya system also, there is a lot. There are all this great devotional poetry of Shankaracharya. They all emphasize this self-surrender much more emphatically than any of Ramanuja's works, even Sharanagati Gadyam. But the point is, when you turn to Shankaracharya's philosophical, metaphysical classics, there is no question of grace or anything. You can walk your spiritual road, with your chest drawn up, with all sense of pride, you can reach liberation. Complete acceptance of free will, you find. That's important. Thank you. Question.
Hello, Swamiji. I have two questions. 2 weeks ago in the Gita class, you were talking about when the mind does not comply, you can use tatsa yourself. And I do not understand, this is a more complicated question, I do not understand how it is tatsa gets the mind to be compliant.
Oh, yeah.
And then last week somebody asked you kind of a similar question, like how do I cast a tatsat spell on my mind, kind of just question to you about that, like there's an application understanding problem. And my next question is...
This question I will answer, because then I will come. Please ask the next question. I shall answer this first. So, Om Tsat Tatsat Iti Nirdesho Brahmanas Trivedastika. Brahmanas Tena Yenascha Vedascha Ejnascha Vidakriya. So what it means is, those who cannot practice certain ritualistic purificatory rituals before doing puja, before doing any auspicious rituals, they can, with a great sense of sanctity and sacredness, if you recite word Om Tat Sat, then all actions get purified. But then, to make this really happen in our life, we should have reached a high level of understanding of the implications of these terms. Om, that is Pranava, and Tat Sat. Tat is Brahman. Tat is the all-pervading eternal reality, which is purity itself, sanctity itself. And Sat, Sadbhava, it means auspiciousness, goodness, all austerity, all these things are included. So, when a person can identify these three terms with all these qualities, the all-pervading spiritual reality, if he could do that, then for him everything is spiritual. With that, what we call bhava in Sanskrit, strong conviction and identification, if you utter that mantra, then it becomes really purified. Very often, the mantra's potency, the potency of reciting mantra is in direct proportion to your correct understanding of its meaning and your own identity with that mantra. The mantras become potent because they were used for meditation and recitation and chanting by saints and sages and great spiritual seekers for thousands of years. So those words have gathered a lot of potency. And when your mind is ready, is pure, with the same sense of sanctity, sacredness and total concentration, then the potency of that mantra is transmitted to your heart,
Yes.
Otherwise, you can hear this, I heard music, Om Tat Sat, and some Ekam Sat Vipra Bhudavadi, all this very, very vocal, very sensational, very loud music you can hear. Hearing that, if you can identify with those sacred statements with the real implication, it is possible. But this kind of very loud chanting, it's certainly far better than chanting anything else. That's true, something else. But then, to become a real mantra, we should do it with all sense of sanctity and sacredness and identification. Then it has a real effect. The same is true also if you can really recite, if you belong to a Christian tradition, you recite some sacred hymns with full identification, the same thing happen to you. Depends upon where our mind is. But Om Tat Sat, it's philosophically and spiritually, it is so potent and is so significant. Okay, next question, please. Next question you are asking, please.
Much easier, I think. Is Jiva Mukta similar to Bodhisattva? How are they similar or different? The term Bodhisattva.
Yeah. From a spiritual experience point of view, it's the same. Okay. No doubt about it. But then Buddhism is metaphysically and spiritually, it belongs to a different tradition. It doesn't accept the Vedas. So that problem is there. But from a spiritual perspective, I would say Bodhisattva, Tathagata or Buddha himself, he is not in any way different from the great sages of Hinduism. Buddha, if you read his life, whether he accepted Hinduism or not, he was a born Hindu only. Buddha was trained and he lived like a Hindu till he got enlightenment. So remember, we could see only a great Hindu sage in Buddha. A great realized Hindu sage, what we call Brahmajnani, knower of Brahman. That's what we can find in Buddha. So see?
Yeah, I am just...
Yeah.
There are very few Hindus around me in any way. It's mostly a Buddhist area, so I'm more familiar with that. So that's why I asked. That's all. Thank you very much.
Well, you mentioned that Shankara does not emphasize, there's no place for grace. But I realized that...
In his philosophical classics, I also made clear that in his devotional poetry, he emphasizes grace and bhakti much more forcefully than even Ramanuja in his Gadyatraya, especially Vaikuntha Gadya and Charanagati Gadya. So you find Shankaracharya's stotras, there is a lot of Advaitic philosophy, and then there is a lot of this Prapatti aspect. It's a very, very famous, so that's an important thing. So very often, what really happened during the post-Shankarite times, during the dialectical exchange between Ramanujas like Venkatanatha, that is Vedanta Desika, on the one hand, and also most importantly, between Advaitins and Dvaitins. Dvaiti means Jayatirtha, Vaditirtha, Trivikrama Pandita, and Vyasatirtha. They're the most prominent ones. They wrote some very great, wonderful dialectical classics trying to refute Advaitins. And Advaitins wrote greater books, more dialectically, much more complex than Madhva philosophy, Harshigasha's Khandana Khandakadya, Tattva Pratipika of Chitsukhi, Padmapada's Panchapadika and Prakashatmayadi's Panchapadika Vivarana, and even later in Prakashatman's is Siddhanta Muktavali, where he establishes this Srishti Drishtivada and Drishti Srishtivada, or later. Anyway, the point is, there was so much of dialectical exchange between Madhva dialecticians and Advaitins. So during this time, what happened? The bhakti element in Shankara's classics, philosophical classics, especially Gita Bhashya, and also in his poetry, they took a backseat. They did not receive much attention in this clash of dialecticians. So that was the real reason why the bhakti element of Shankara's bhashyas was not properly recognized by later scholars. Till Madhusudana Saraswati appeared in 16th century, and he wrote this well-known Gurartha Deepika, which is a great gloss, called Tiga, on Shankara Bhashya, following the footsteps of Shankara Bhashya on Bhagavad Gita. So that's an important...
In Shankara system, we are muktas, moksha karyatvat.
Yeah.
We cultivate the sadhana Shavana Nidhyasana. But what determines whether we are successfully able to overcome the adhyasa and realize our true nature? It is not attributable to grace, but there is an element of chance, or there is something which is not deterministic there.
Yeah, you have to remember one. Yeah. Okay, you have to remember when you talk about grace, you have to remember everywhere, include where Narada Bhakti Sutras, Chandilya Bhakti Sutras, or Christian mysticism, the writings of Saint Teresa of Avila, and also in Shankara and Ramanuja elsewhere, you find there is a wonderful harmony between human effort and also God's grace. This is found in all traditions, including Shankaracharya's traditions. Human effort and God's grace. Human effort is important because without human effort, we won't make ourselves ready. We will not be able to prepare our mind to recognize God's grace as God's grace. If you are not ready, if your mind is not ready, not pure enough to recognize God's grace, then you will interpret God's grace as an accident or a luck. That's the thing. So unless we are ready, our mind is ready to recognize God's grace as God's grace, God's grace has no real value. This is an important thing. You have heard the story. Somebody promised a clergyman, a clergyman requested for some donation, and a believer in the parish, he promised, well, if I get $1,000, I shall give you 50%. So he came out of the church, walking in the streets, and he found a wallet lying in the street, and he opened up and he found $500. So he said, "Oh, Lord, you have taken your share, so I don't have to give you anything." So, so instead of giving $250, half of what he got, he interpreted in his own way. God has already taken his share, and giving him only his share means $500. So frequently in the human greed, our mind plays tricks with us, and then we are not able to recognize God's grace as God's grace. We interpret God's grace as accident. This is an important thing to remember. So God's grace will be recognized as God's grace only when we are ready for it. Otherwise we won't be able to recognize it. So we should be ready. Only what we earn is ours, not what we are given. We may get a lot of things, but that may not become yours unless you earn it. And you earn it, you reach a point where you deserve it only through Purusha Prayatna. It's called Kripa and Purusha Prayatna. Kripa means grace. Purusha Prayatna means human effort, which of course involves free will, as David referred to, free will. So free will is important in human effort. And then you find yourself ready. You are ready to recognize and make use of God's grace. To recognize and make use of God's grace. And then you find, at some stage you find the so-called human effort was after all a manifestation of God's grace. You recognize the importance of making your own effort, and you could really make your own effort to make yourself ready for God's grace because God's grace. You walk back, you find at every step, which you thought your own independent journey, was actually a journey following the direction you got from within, which is really an expression of God's grace. So that's an important thing to remember. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Rama Krishna Pranamastu.